Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discover the modern at Embassy Gardens. Seville, Singapore is proud to present this collaboration with EcoWorld International, Ballymore Group UK, and Joliet Group for this webinar. Stay tuned as I will be handing off the session to Michael McGill, Research Analyst of Seville's UK, who will give us an insight into the potential of Nine Elms and, of course, a London property market update. We will then explore the modern experience with Roger Black, Creative Director in Real Estate Development from the Ballymore Group. Last but not least, we will invite Dato' Joey Yap, who is the world's foremost authority in Chinese metaphysics, to give us an overview on a Feng Shui assessment of the modern. At the end of this webinar, we will have a brief Q&A session for all our panelists, so please stay tuned till then. Now let me introduce myself. I am Rachel Ho, Assistant Manager from the Residential Services team of Seville, Singapore. If you are unfamiliar with Seville's, we are a global real estate company that is listed on the London Stock Exchange. We employ over 39,000 people across 60 countries worldwide. Our vast international network allows us as a real estate service provider to offer advisory, management, and transaction services. Now, without further ado, let me invite Michael to give us a brief overview on the London market and the prime London outlook. Michael, please.
Cool. Thank you very much, Rachel. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody can see the slides that I'm now sharing from my screen. But yeah, as Rachel said, for the sort of the research presentation, I'm going to take you through sort of a UK-wide overview of where the market currently is, just to set a bit of context, and then delve a bit deeper into the prime London markets in particular, and also why London still stands as a very good investment opportunity, despite obviously the ongoing uncertainty surrounding sort of COVID-19 and of course Brexit. So let's see if this clicks through. Perfect. So to start off with, I'm just going to start by looking at sort of the UK house price growth as shown by these yellow bars on this chart. And what I've done is I've overlaid it with the net balance of opinion on new buyer inquiries and new sales instructions as taken from the RICS monthly survey. And these two measures, so these white and pink lines on the chart, essentially are proxies for supply and demand in the market. And as you can see, at sort of the peak of the pandemic in March, we saw the largest ever 1 month fall in both new buyer inquiries and sales instructions, and that fall continued into April. Although it's important to note here that both of these measures fell in unison. They fell at the same time, they fell by a similar magnitude, and because of that, there wasn't any sort of substantial imbalance in supply and demand during this period. So you can see that the impact it has had on house price growth, with nationwide recording a fall of minus 0.1% in June, which was the first annual price fall in 8 years in the UK. Although since the market has reopened, you can see that there has been quite a strong bounce back. Both new buyer inquiries and new sales instructions bounced back into the positive, and house price growth reached 3.7% in August. So there has been quite a strong return or bounce back in demand since the market has reopened in the country. But in terms of looking towards the future and sort of trying to assess how long this bounce can be sort of sustained for, we need to consider what the economic outlook is in the country. And we're obviously approaching quite an important pivotal time in regards to sort of how we, or the future of the economy. We have the furlough scheme or the job retention scheme ending at the end of October. And obviously more recently, we've just had sort of further restrictions, sort of lockdown restrictions come into play to help battle the pandemic. So it's an important time in regards to sort of how the economy responds. But this chart here looks at the latest economic forecasts from Oxford Economics. And so in the dark blue lines, it shows the sort of the forecast for GDP, forecasted to decrease by around 10% this year before bouncing back quite strongly in 2021. Unemployment, as shown in the lighter blue bars, is expected to reach 6.5% at the end of this year. Obviously, that's in line with that job retention scheme coming to an end. Although just for some context, that's still below the 8% seen during the global financial crisis of 2008. And then finally, the pink line, which you can probably just about make up, is the forecast for the base rate, which is obviously now at a historic low, and is now expected to remain much lower for much longer in an attempt to sort of support the recovery of the economy going forwards. So these first two slides are just pretty much just a bit of context setting, just to give you a background information in regards to the economy and wider market sentiment. But I'm going to focus now on sort of the prime markets in London, and starting off with just to paint the picture of where we were before COVID-19 sort of took over the news. As of the first quarter, or at the first quarter of this year, we did see prices in London 2.4% above where they were in the year before. So it was a very strong start to the year. And this was also the first quarter that we saw positive annual price change since 2016. Obviously, when we had the Brexit or the EU referendum vote, there was a lot of uncertainty which clouded the market for the couple of years after that. So it was a very strong start to the year. And that positivity, that positive sentiment was mainly being driven by the outcome of the general election, which gave greater certainty. It gave greater certainty in regards to the direction of Brexit. And also the consistent price falls that we had seen since 2016 had put Prime London in a position of very good value. As you'd expect, the disruption caused by COVID-19 has naturally put the brakes on that recovery somewhat, although as I've referred into the first couple of slides, demand has bounced back quite relatively quickly and strongly since it has the market has reopened, and values now currently across Prime London sit 1% above where they were at this point last year. And so while values have held up relatively well in Prime London, transactions have also begun to start to return to normal levels. So this chart here just simply looks at the number of £1 million plus transactions in PCL. And you can again see the clear dip in activity around April and May, where the market was essentially put on freeze, and then picking back up and sort of returning to normal levels in August. And in August, transactions were just under 90% of the level they were over the first 3 months of the year. So not far off that very strong start to the year, which I mentioned on the previous slide. And over the past 12 months, they are just 5% below where they were last year. So we can definitely see demand coming back to the market and us returning to sort of the normal trend in the prime market. But in terms of thinking about how much this bounce back in demand again can be sustained in the prime market, it's important to understand that this is a very different kind of downturn to the ones that we've seen in the past. Firstly, house price growth in the run up to this downturn has been modest. Interest rates, as I mentioned, at an unprecedented low, and the government intervention has helped support homeowners and home buyers in the form of the furlough scheme and mortgage holidays. Unlike a lot of the previous downturns where there's sort of prolonged periods, this one's expected to be a V-shaped downturn, so a sharp fall followed by a sharp recovery next year. Although global wealth generation may be a bit slower to recover, it all depends on how well other parts of the world battle this pandemic and how well their economies recover. So bearing this in mind, our forecasts for capital value growth across Prime London are shown on this screen here. So over the 5-year period between 2020 and 2024, we are forecasting a 10.3% growth in Prime London values, with a slight outperformance in the Prime Central London region because there have been much larger falls in that sort of the most expensive part of Prime London over the past few years, making even more value. So over sort of the medium term, the outlook for Prime London remains still quite positive. A lot of growth once we come out of sort of the economic downturn in this year. So while I've covered sort of what the short to medium term impact of COVID-19 might be for the prime markets, I'm now going to sort of look at London as an investment opportunity. And as I mentioned at the start, why, despite the pandemic, London still looks a very attractive proposition for investment. And firstly, there are a number of sort of key fundamentals which haven't changed or haven't been affected by COVID-19 that all provide sort of long-term reasons to invest in London. And sort of they're all sort of popped up on your screen here. And they include the likes of the maturity of the real estate market, the time zone, the culture, the heritage, the sort of things that are, I guess, somewhat immune to outside disruption, the things that will always sort of be there, always be sort of key sort of selling points or investment points in London. And so I mentioned obviously there's going to be a short-term dip in the economy, but over the long term, the outlook for the London economy still looks very strong and very secure. So over the next 10 years, or between 2020 and 2030, the GDP in London is forecasted to increase by 30%, which is a greater forecast than the likes of New York, Berlin, and Paris, with sort of 750,000 jobs and a population increase of 650,000 people expected during this year, as per Oxford Economics. As I mentioned already, the interest rates are at historic lows, and in terms of cross-border investment, well, London still comfortably leads the way in terms of the number or the volume of investment coming in, with $6.9 billion of cross-border investment just in the first half of this year. There's also a couple of other factors, such as the significant currency advantage to be had at the moment, a competitive tax environment, and the long-term shortfall in housing supply in London. And I'm going to look at a couple of these in a bit more detail. So with regards to the strength of the pound, it's obviously taken a fair bit of a hit in recent years since the EU referendum took place in 2016, which provided its fair share of uncertainty, and has obviously now since been compounded by the impact of COVID-19. But the upside of this is that it obviously does provide a significant currency advantage, particularly for overseas purchasers buying property in London. And if you take into account the currency movements, along with the falls in prices that we've seen since 2016, there are significant opportunities, as I mentioned, to be had in prime London. So a purchaser buying in Singapore dollars would be paying 25% less today than they would have in 2016, take into account currency and price movements, and a similar discount to be had for those purchasing in US dollars as well. And this is obviously quite a significant saving, it's quite a big opportunity, and with sort of the pound expected to recover as we hopefully negotiate a Brexit deal, and we hopefully start to recover from the pandemic next year, we may see this currency advantage begin to fade away, which makes it now a very good time to be looking for a purchase in London. I also touched on sort of the long-term undersupply in London, and this chart here nicely sort of illustrates the scale of that. So these bars here, these light grey bars, illustrate the number of homes being built each year. Most recently, we're just at under 40,000 in the year to Q2 2020. And when we sort of compare that to sort of the targets set in the London plan, you can see it's well below what's being identified as the number of homes being needed, which is 66,000 homes a year, and even below the inspectorate's sort of revised down recommended target of 52,500 homes a year. So it's clear there's quite a big surplus of demand over supply, and that looks set to continue over the coming years. And so from an investment point of view, there will certainly not be any pressures from an oversupplied market, because there's expected to be this continual lack of supply in the London market. So just to sum up some of these key points which I've just been through, I won't go through all of these individually because they I've sort of covered them off, but hopefully it sort of demonstrates why, despite the uncertainty, despite Brexit, despite COVID, there are fundamentals in London which still make it a very strong investment opportunity, and these sort of fundamentals which haven't changed over the past few months. And so for the final few slides and the final section of my presentation, I thought I'd just run through sort of the local area to Embassy Gardens and sort of just highlight why it's such an impressive sort of regeneration project and give you some of the key numbers. So along with Vauxhall and Battersea, Nine Elms forms one of London's opportunity areas, which are areas in London which have been sort of earmarked as those places which have significant capacity for development. So this opportunity area, which is also shortened to VNEB, has the capacity to create up to 25,000 new jobs and a minimum of 20,000 homes. And as part of the redevelopment, infrastructure improvements will include the Northern Line extension, which is due to open in autumn 2021. And that will provide 2 new tube stations at Nine Elms and at Battersea Power Station, which will open up transport links into the likes of Westminster, the City, Leicester Square, all in under 15 minutes. So it's in a very well-connected area. Another element of sort of improving connectivity is the new Thames Bridge, which has been designed to connect Nine Elms and Pimlico, and it'll be the first Thames crossings first Thames crossing to develop, or was developed specifically to meet the needs of pedestrians and cyclists. In terms of green and open space, there's an abundance of parks, public squares, footpaths, and other outdoor recreational spaces around Nine Elms. Nine Elms Park itself will be made up of, sort of a continuous green corridor stretching through the district, and of course right next to Nine Elms we have Battersea Park, which is a 200-acre park and is Grade 2 listed on the Register of Historic Parks and Gardens. And then finally, just to touch on the sort of commercial aspect of the area, there's obviously the new US Embassy at the centre of Nine Elms, but also the likes of Apple and Penguin, the publishing company, have opened up new office space in recent years. So it's also attracting that commercial aspect as well. Another sort of key aspect of the Nine Elms area is its remarkable accessibility to some of London's, and indeed, of course, the world's best universities. So this chart here shows the travel times to 10 of London's top universities from Embassy Gardens, as shown by the dots on this chart. And it also shows the breakdown of each of these university student population in regards to are they UK-based or overseas students. And as you can see, King's College London and University College London in particular, so the second and third universities on this chart, both have very popular or large proportions of their students from overseas, and both are within just a 25-minute travel time of Embassy Gardens. And so this area is likely to be very popular amongst overseas students as well. There had been some murmurs, some concern about how COVID-19 might impact overseas student demand, and whether or not it would put students off sort of applying and sort of feeling secure and safe in coming over to London to study. Although taking a look at sort of the latest university application numbers, so figures from UCAS, which is sort of the UK's university application portal, it does show that there hasn't really been any dip in student applications. Application numbers were actually up 2% compared to 2019, and applications from non-EU students actually up 10%. So there certainly hasn't been a dip in demand from sort of overseas university students. And again, I've just split out there sort of from China and Hong Kong. See, China in particular has seen an increase of 24% in the number of applications compared to last year. So certainly still expected to be sufficient or significant demand from overseas students in this sort of area. I'm just going to move on to sort of the residential market around Nine Elms and sort of how that's performed recently. Starting off with sort of a heat map, so just showing average transaction values, and this is back in 2012. And this is when the planning framework for the VNEB opportunity area was first published. And you can see most of the majority of the area sits in the range of sort of 250 to 500,000 pounds. Although obviously since then there's been a lot of investment, there's been a lot of development in the area, and as a result we have seen quite significant price growth. So if we fast forward to 2020, you can see now that this map is obviously a lot darker, a lot more dark red, indicating higher transaction values. The average transaction value in the area now sits between that 750 and £1 million, which is more in line with sort of the values seen across the Thames in the likes of Westminster. Although what's sort of interesting and sort of significant about this map here is that you can see where Embassy Gardens actually sits, so where the logo is on that map. It still sits in an area which offers relative value compared to some of the more expensive areas around sort of the wide areas such as Battersea Park and Vauxhall. And this suggests, because it's still relatively undervalued compared to these areas, that there is still room for further capital growth in the immediate local area surrounding Embassy Gardens. And then just looking more recently at, I guess, the prime southwest London market, it actually has been the strongest performing prime market in London, with an annual growth of plus 3.3% in the year to Q3 of 2020, which is greater than the 1% seen across all of prime London. And looking back at this chart over the last couple of years, it has been one of the best performing, or has been outperforming the London average over the past couple of years. And so it seems that in the past 12 months, the disruption caused by COVID-19 certainly hasn't dampened any of the demand for sort of prime properties in this area. So there's obviously some clearly positive stories coming out of this part of the prime market in London. Hopefully, I think that this is the end of my slides. So hopefully you've all found that interesting. And now I will hand back over to Rachel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. So now let us hear from Roger Black, who will bring us on a tour through Embassy Gardens, a riverside district in the heart of Nine Elms. Roger, it is over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I thought I'd begin with a brief resume of what Embassy Gardens is all about. And this is a view looking across Embassy Gardens, and we see the modern building right here where my cursor is. But really what this is intended to show is how Embassy Gardens not only sits at the center of the capital, but also a key feature of Embassy Gardens, which is the linear park, which runs up the center of the Embassy Gardens and Nine Elms precinct, which connects Vauxhall all the way through to Battersea. And here's another locator for you for London. And here is the Embassy Gardens district where my cursor is floating on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. And you see the very close proximity to Westminster, which is on the left over here, and all of Pimlico and Victoria over here. And then just slightly further afield is the Shard and the City of London. So it's actually amazingly well located. The travel time to get from Embassy Gardens directly over to the city is much shorter across this route here than it is actually to travel north. Also note as well, and Michael just previously spoke about, a new pedestrian and cycle footbridge, which is going to be built across the Thames. And this is actually lands right here where my cursor is, right next to the US Embassy over here, and spans the Thames right over to here into Pimlico. So that has been given the go-ahead by government, and that will be built in the fullness of time. So again, just to sort of re-familiarize you with where we are, we're in this sort of slightly western part of the central part of the capital, the close proximity you see to Pimlico and Victoria, and Buckingham Palace over here, the Houses of Parliament, and the City of London over here. You know, Embassy Gardens really is right in the heart of London. And critically, an important asset of the project is its connectivity via public transport. And we can see here that the new Nine Elms extension to the Northern Line, so underground station built literally right next door to the estate, but also just literally a few minutes away is Vauxhall Station, and that gets you onto the Victoria Line. We also have the Thames Clipper, the river bus, literally again just minutes away from the site. So an understanding why Embassy Gardens is such an important investment proposition in London is really, it's important to just take a slight step back and have an appreciation for the entire South Bank and its journey over the past 30 odd years. This part of London has historically been an industrial zone, which was created, I guess, as a consequence of the existence of this elevated train lines where you see my cursor wrapping all the way around here. That's an elevated train line over there, which separated the edge of the river from what was really the dormitory community of South London over here. And this zone, this edge of the capital here, had at one end here Battersea Power Station at this end, and at this end over here had the Bankside Power Station. And those two, dare I say, polluting entities creating electricity really set the character for all of this zone being an industrial edge to the city. But of course, as modernization has come, that industry has moved out of the capital, which has created this 30-year journey transformation from what was an industrial part of London to now the South Bank, and you sort of recognize the Mayor of London's office and further afield. And for those of you who've been historic investors in London, you'll appreciate that areas like Butler's Wharf, areas around Borough Market, South Bank itself, the South Bank Centre, the Royal Festival Hall, and all the development that's happened all around there, and now heading further west out into Vauxhall. And what is left is this sort of element here, the western edge of the South Bank area is now the last in this jigsaw puzzle of central London redevelopment on an importantly large scale. And so in the South Bank journey, we've had things like Tate Modern and the Turbine Hall, we've had the Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, the Millennial Wheel, the Hayward Gallery, the National Theatre, and so forth. So, you know, the South Bank has really become London's story for more than a generation. It's an important part of the capital. And so this map here shows the sort of the wider context spanning between Vauxhall Station on the right here and Battersea Power Station on the left. And I put this map up here because this, in fact, is actually a schedule of all the commercial development which is also happening in this precinct. This is not just a dormitory community. This is an entirely new precinct. Which is going to be part of London's economic engine room, as well as a great place to live. And of course, you're familiar that the US Embassy is right at the heart of the Embassy Gardens estate, but also on the western edge, we have Battersea Power Station, and that's going to be home to Apple and their new European headquarters. And there's an array of other commercial development happening across the piece here. And just also referring to Michael's earlier point about the new pedestrian footbridge, which is connecting the Embassy Gardens estate with Pimlico, that's all being given the go-ahead, and that will be built in the fullness of time. So the modern building is literally right here where my cursor is. It's literally 50 meters, it's right on your doorstep. And also note, just on the other side of the viaduct is the new Nine Elms station. So all of this is happening. It's all under construction now. And again, literally, there's our building and there's the entrance to the station. Not forgetting, of course, that if you want to get onto the Victoria line, you can walk through the wonderful linear park down the centre here to Vauxhall Station, and also through the linear park through out to Battersea as well. So an amazingly well-connected estate right at the heart of this new precinct. And that's the Battersea Power Station, as I said, which will be home to Apple in the fullness of time. So looking more closely at the estate, phase one of the development was an immense success on Embassy Gardens here, and that came forward at about the same time that the US Embassy was being built. And of course, when all of that was happening, you know, it really was a large, wider construction zone. But of course, now the estate is really well settled and looking fantastic. And this is phase two, which is the Eco World Ballymore joint venture. And all of these three buildings exist as a single physical entity, which I shall talk about in a second. Where my cursor is now, that's the new international headquarters for Penguin Random House, the publishers, and here is a new office building coming forward. So all of this estate here is a sort of a dynamic sort of urban opportunity where it's not just people living, but also working, and also the diplomatic work of the embassy. Now, just talking about these three buildings, it's important to understand that there is a super lobby in the middle of this building here, and all residents enter here enjoy the fantastic facilities. And then you have these podium level gardens which float above the street, and all of these are connected with these wonderful bridges and walkways. The facilities for residents are in this set of buildings here, but also in phase one as well. And residents have access to all those facilities across the estate. I mentioned earlier about the linear park, which runs through the center of the project, connecting Vauxhall Station and Battersea Power Station. And of course, the inspiration for that is the High Line in New York, which I'm sure many of you have visited. It is the #1 attraction in New York. And it's fantastic, not just in and of itself as an attraction, but also for its economic impact. The transformation of real estate values along that linear route has been exponential and has proven to be a template for urban development all over the world. And that has been aggressively incorporated into the project. So here you have a view of Embassy Gardens today, and this is part of that linear park experience here. This is phase one over here. This is phase two. This is Eco World Ballymore here on our left. That's the American Embassy. And just over here in the distance where my cursor is floating, those buildings now have begun construction, and the route will travel all the way through here, all the way out to Battersea Power Station. It's a truly beautiful environment, and that's a view looking down on part of that experience here. Embedded in the park is quite a few pieces of public art. This is a Gooby, designed by Gooby the artist. This is a giant rice bowl, beautiful object, but another beautiful object here by Fujiwara, lovely piece of sculpture in the park, and a further one here as well. So it's a sort of a beautiful environment augmented by really quite delightful objects and various experiences. So this is a view looking within this phase of the project, looking at the American Embassy with Darby's restaurant on the right-hand side. And I'm going to talk to you about that in just a second. So this is looking at the project specifically, and the modern building is being built literally just on the edge of the left-hand side of this image here, where my cursor is running up and down the screen here, all three of these buildings work as a single entity. This is one of those high-level bridges I was talking to you about, which connects all three buildings at podium level across this estate here. And the yellow element here, this is the very important sky pool, which we will touch on in a few moments' time. This is a view of Penguin Random House. This is their international headquarters, which is immediately adjacent to the project. Now, for EcoWorld Ballymore, you know, we're in the business of building beautiful buildings and with the best architects in the world with fantastic interiors. But, you know, truly, these are just, in many respects, empty vessels, and we see it as our responsibility to go beyond just building apartments to actually creating a fantastic social experience for everyone who visits or lives on the estate. And to that end, we have invested in infrastructure, social infrastructure. And one of those is this fantastic Darby's restaurant, which was reviewed following its opening by the Guardian newspaper as one of the best restaurants in London. And this is a formal dining, but it's also cafe, it's a cocktail lounge, it's a bakery, it's a really pluralistic, dynamic leisure space. And I encourage you to look up the Guardian Darby's and read this review for yourself. I have to say the menu is absolutely fantastic. And it's just been an astonishing success and is one of the great facilities which exists on the estate. I mean, the food is, tremendous. I can't wait to get back there again. And it's, believe it or not, it's flourished through the COVID lockdown. Also on the estate is Linnaean, which is probably one of the finest well-being spas in London. This has had millions and millions spent on it, and it is truly an absolutely beautiful experience, a beautiful place, the wonderful healthy living cafe that they also have in there, and all the treatments under the sun. This is truly a first-class experience, and this is on the estate as well. We also have the Alchemist, which is a cocktail lounge with all the mixologists and a great social platform. But also, you know, the everyday stuff. And we're blessed by having one of the best Waitrose supermarkets in the capital physically on site. Waitrose have spared no expense in their fit out here with the bakery, the sushi bar, the fishmonger, fantastic grocery store. I mean, it's just there. It's absolutely first class. And for those familiar with Britain, you'll know that Waitrose is seen as the premier supermarket choice within the UK. But also, you know, if you want to have something a little more relaxed, we have a District Cafe, coffee shop there as well. Another entity that we supported. In a sense, it started as a pop-up, and it proved to be such a success that they've now become a permanent resident on the estate. So now let me take you inside the building, and this is one of the two approaches to the super lobby. This is from the ravine side. This is if you're a pedestrian access. On the other side of this lobby is if you're being dropped off in your chauffeur-driven car or by taxi, or dropping your car off for valet parking. And you enter here into this magnificent super lobby with a service counter. I'm now standing from the vehicle side of that lobby, looking through and actually at the ravine garden to the other side there. And, you know, it's every time you come home, you're just going to feel really proud to live here. I mean, the people who are here already just absolutely, they love it because it's just beautiful. Some lovely views through some of those spaces. So this is one of the number of social spaces we have, one of the residence lounges, and people can book this out for their own private events and parties and business conferences. But also there's a rolling program of lectures and book talks and fashion shows and so forth. And this is one of the things that EcoWorld Ballymore is very clear in their purpose, that we are keen to support all of these sort of social activities which allow people as strangers to come together in an informal setting to create new social clusters, new groups, find new friends, and ultimately create a really exciting community to live in. And to that end, it's been a huge success. This is the cinema, which runs movies every night, but also a space that you can book out privately, again, for your parties, but also for business events, should you choose as well. We recognize that a lot of people are working within the modern economy, and we have invested heavily in the co-working lounge space. This is the hospitality part of that lounge. And through just further afield through the lounge, you see the wonderful, beautiful co-working spaces. In a sense, it's these sorts of environments which make living at Embassy Gardens something really quite special. Yes, the homes are beautiful, but actually everything is wonderful. And the people you meet there, your peer group and so forth, really set the tone. This is one of several fitness facilities we have across the estate. And we recognize that there's this huge move towards group fitness exercises. So we run more than 40 sessions a week, group sessions. And in a sense, the gym has now become the new nightclub. This is where you also go and meet new friends. And these rows here, they're actually looking out over the linear park and at the embassy. So this is just one of several of those gym facilities. This is another one over in the other side of the estate, and again, some more extensive facilities, all the modern stuff. But you know, the kit is there, but more importantly, it's the trainers and it's the group sessions that really make it really quite special. Because if you're new to London and you don't know anybody, how do you meet new friends? How do you get involved in new activities and so forth? And that's what all of these facilities do. So this is one of the two swimming pools we have, and this is the indoor swimming pool, and with lots of lounge chairs, a wonderful, warm, tepid environment to be enjoyed, I would say more particularly in the colder times of the year. Over here on the right-hand side is the sauna and steam facilities. And you'll notice here just off to the left, you have the alleyway which leads you to the outdoor spa. You know, these facilities are great when it's raining and it's snowing. That's the best time to be out there in the hot tub. So that's one of the two swimming pools. But more importantly, let's talk about the pool that has really put Embassy Gardens on the international map. When this image was released into the press, it actually got released by accident, believe it or not. We sent it to a journalist at the Evening Standard, who we thought would run a nice little story on it. And literally within 7 days, this thing had leaked out. And this image had been seen 1 billion times around the world, a truly viral moment. And so what we have here are 2 of the buildings 10 stories tall and a 25-meter lap pool spanning between those 2 buildings. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that now. That pool is not made of glass. It's made of a material, the same material that they use to build aquariums throughout the world. And the manufacturer of our pool in the United States is the preeminent manufacturer of aquariums around the world. So this pool is now complete. It's actually just about arrived in London. I think it has arrived in London, and will be moved into position and lifted into place in the next few days. So this is an artist's impression of what that pool would be like. And what's really interesting about the material, the acrylic, unlike glass, thick glass, as I'm sure you'll all appreciate, has a color, but acrylic doesn't. And so the only color you'll see when you're in the pool is the color of the water itself. Water has color, but acrylic doesn't. And so when you're swimming in this pool with your goggles on, particularly at night when you don't have any refracted light, you will truly, truly have the experience of floating in air. It's amazing. And so this is a view of that 25-meter lap pool. And I should note that EcoWorld Ballymore, in all of our 3 main projects in London, Embassy Gardens, the Wardian and City Island, 25-meter lap pools feature in all projects, because pools are important places to play, but they're also needed for fitness. And this pool literally spans between these 2 towers at the 10th story. You arrive here onto the lounge deck here. There's also a wonderful restaurant, a poolside bar and restaurant, which will be run by Darby's, which is on the ground below this tower. Here is the footbridge, which connects the 2 sun decks, and the sun deck on the western side of the pool there. So an amazing amount of leisure space with absolutely fantastic views I mean, this is going to be a special thing. And it's special not just to live there, but I think from an investment perspective, this is kind of one of those landmark moments, really. This is what's going to put Embassy Gardens on the international, has already, but will put Embassy Gardens on the international map and underpin the investment value of the real estate here for generations to come. 25-meter swimming pools suspended in the sky are a rare commodity. And in fact, this is the only one in the world. So this is the shroud, which has been put in place in readiness for the installation of the pool, which will, I believe, depending on the weather, will be lifted into position next Monday. You'll see here at the ground, that's Darby's restaurant on the left side over here. And on the right-hand side, that's the Alchemist cocktail bar. And actually you can see here, this is one of those elevated bridges which links the podium gardens of the three buildings together across the estates. Another view there of the pool. It's magic. I'm really excited. I'm really excited. So I guess what sort of, as I was saying earlier, for Eco World Ballymore, we've been very clear that yes, we build beautiful buildings and great apartments, but for us, the real benchmark is what we described as the lived experience. What makes living here that much more special than living anywhere else? And at the end of the day, yes, we need great facilities, but most importantly, it comes down to the on-site management teams and the support they provide and how they also choreograph the activities and programs that happen there, right from the doorman at the super lobby through to front of house, desk service being absolutely critical, through into the post room. We have a fully manned parcel service. It's completely automated. Every object that's received is scanned. Every resident receives an automatic SMS message alerting them to the receipt of their package. I mean, it's a fully tracked and fully manned secure parcel handling service. Every time we run a customer survey, this is always and consistently always valued as the most appreciated service on the estate. Because listen, when you order your new laptop or your new dress, you just want to make sure it comes and you want it. And yeah, this is what we do. We recognize as well that your well-being is important, and all of our estates are very safe, but to sort of underpin that, we invest heavily in the security infrastructure, and this is manned 24 hours a day, and it's just really peace of mind, really. But it's there, it's important. And so is the back of house, the general management team, all on site. So it's a fully manned, fully staffed estate environment. And here's a view of the valet parking services. So what has this engendered? And for those of you who use Instagram, and perhaps even for those of you who don't, I would very strongly urge you to log into your Instagram and type in Embassy Gardens. And you will see these are all pictures which have been downloaded from the Embassy Gardens Instagram feed. And you'll see here probably one of the most engaged, exciting, beautiful community of people which have come together because Eco World Ballymore have invested not just in the infrastructure, but also in the events which have brought people together. And now what you have is not only a great demand for people to own property, but also for people to rent property here as well. People are drawn to this place because of the social quality of the environment. And these are all the sorts of images, selection of images, which I've just taken down from Instagram, just to sort of show you how people are broadcasting their life experience on this estate. It's one of the hottest places to live in London, which again is underpinning the investment value, because that if you are perhaps renting out, you have great demand for apartments there. But also if you're sending your kids to London to go to school, that they are able to sort of live in an environment where there's lots of fun things going on and a great peer group of individuals to engage with, to really make their London experience one that's truly, truly special. So there you have it. That's our brief introduction to the estate. But the modern itself, looking more specifically, I take you back to this image I showed you earlier. This is the modern. This is the last of these 3 buildings that are being built here. The Sky Pool is just over here. So buildings 1, 2, and 3, and this is modern. This is the last opportunity you have to buy an apartment in Embassy Gardens, because the balance of the development is going to be another office building. Now, there are other developments further afield, absolutely, but this is the middle, this is the heart, and not only geographically, but also socially. That's a view of the building itself. And you have apartments which are looking towards the Thames, so they're north view apartments, but then you have apartments looking west, so you have all of the afternoon sunlight. You have apartments on the other side looking to the east, where you have fantastic views of Westminster and the city, and importantly, apartments to the south, where you have the best of the daylight. So you either have your choice of views or sunlight or both. So all of the apartments are fantastic. All the orientations have their pluses. This is a view at the podium level. This is the bridge that connects the buildings together. This is the podium garden. You rise up through the super lobby. You walk across the podium level walkways like our elevated high line to each of the buildings. And this is the entrance through into the modern. And here's a view of the top of the building with the apartments and balconies looking out. So just having a quick canter through these images, and these are all in the brochure material, which is at your disposal. Yes, for us, we care about interiors and the quality of the space. So it's beautiful kitchens, beautiful bathrooms, but also really cleverly laid out apartments where we have sought at every opportunity to minimize the extent of corridors and circulation so that one gets to enjoy every square meter of the home. And this is a view of the kitchen done in this beautiful burgundy with the terrazzo style. Well, it is terrazzo surfaces and backsplashes through into the beautiful bathrooms, again with a terrazzo on the floor. These are important fashion moments. We think stylistically we are absolutely ahead of the curve. This is what makes living in a Ballymore development also a key driver for those who are buyers and renters alike. This is looking at one of the master bedroom suites where you have the co-location of the wet area and the bed space. This is a formula right from the early days of Embassy Gardens, which has proven to be an absolutely smashing success. And another view across one of the beautiful flats. And then views out. So this is one which is looking to the west, and one looking to the east across the Thames. All the apartments, I'm not going to take you through the apartment plans. That's for you to do with your professional advisors. But what I would say is that as you begin to examine the plans, you'll see a sort of a general formula where apartments which are on the corner are hugging the corner with dual aspect. You'll notice that where we have entrance elements here, we have really minimized the amounts of corridor areas. You'll see here almost no corridors whatsoever. And a formula which is tried and tested and that we have found to be fantastic, really. They're super efficient apartments which create a great experience, plenty of room for storage as well. So there's our story for Embassy Gardens and the modern.
Thank you very much, Roger. Thank you for giving us an insight into how it feels like to live and breathe at the modern at Embassy Gardens. Now let's invite Dr. Joey Yap to come on board and share more about the modern Feng Shui assessment. Hi, Dato. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Hi, doing very well. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, hopefully one day we can meet face to face, but for now this will have to do. So Dato, I must say that your credentials are very amazing. For the audience out there who do not know, Dato Joey Yap is the world's #1 authority in Chinese metaphysics and Feng Shui. So is it true that you started studying this field at the age of 17?
Yeah, probably before that, and I started practicing it while I was in university. Yep.
Interesting. Okay, fantastic. So Dato is also the best-selling author of 183 books, speaking to about more than 500,000 people at his live events, which is featured on CNN, Bloomberg, as well as CNBC. So we are actually very honored to have you here sharing your expertise with us. Dato, you also have a global following of 2.3 million followers. You're like an influencer.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. So maybe
Hello
we can
everyone.
start off. Yes. Yeah. So glad to have you here with us. Maybe we can start off with the first question.
Right.
So regarding the London property market, right? What is from
Right.
this year up to next year, in the Feng Shui perspective, how would the London property market look like?
All right. From the Feng Shui perspective, we are still in the transition for what we call period 8 to period 9. So what we will see is, well, it's not going to be that exciting in terms of pricing because right now it's still in a transition mode. So the biggest the transition will happen around 23 to 24. So right now it's still stable.
Okay, I see. So in your videos, you also mentioned that there's always a time cycle for Feng Shui. So is this a prosperous time cycle right now, or is it only in 2023?
I think the after 2024, 2023, 24, then you see the prosperous cycle coming. So it'll be good time for us to acquire right now. So to make way for, you know, what's coming
make way
ahead.
For the growth.
So,
I
correct,
see.
correct.
Yeah. Okay, I think that is good news for like our audience out there who wants to invest. You know, this is the time because you are going to ride the cycle up. So there are also four major important factors. What are the four important factors in Feng Shui?
All right. So now I think a lot of people have probably a general idea what Feng Shui is. But before I talk about the four factors, let me just explain that. Generally, people have the idea that Feng Shui is how you decorate your house. Okay. I think that is not the correct perspective. That is maybe like 5% of Feng Shui. The actual Feng Shui basically talks about the energy of the environment. And this is so important because I think the whole discussion of what the entire description of what, linear garden and all that is how people feel in the place.
Yes.
So if you go to any environment in general, if you feel good, if it energizes you, right, that is generally good Feng Shui. If you go to a place and you really feel bad and this is not a place I want to stay in and I feel really upset staying in this place, then that is negative Feng Shui. In general, that's what it means. So everything is energy, okay? So there are four factors when we talk about Feng Shui that influences such energy. Number one is the environment. When we say environment, we're talking about the natural contours or the water formation, okay? Because this is Mother Nature we're talking about. And it's a connection with this Mother Nature. I know it sounds a little bit esoteric or unorthodox, but a lot of people derive energy from being in a certain place. They feel good about a certain place. That's why certain people like to do mountain biking. They like to go to nature and stuff like that. Okay, that's the first thing. It's called environment. The second thing that we talk about is the building structure, because the building has to be able to align to the natural energies or the vibration of the external environment. So the second factor is the building. The third factor is the people. Different people will respond or react differently to different types of energy. Okay, so certain people might like a certain direction better. Certain people like to be closer to the water and so forth. So our vibrational energy is different for different people. And the fourth factor is time. At different time periods, there are prosperity, and certain times there also might be a decline. For example, this year, I think everyone's seen that, well, this is like this pandemic thing has thrown us off course, right? So everything is cyclical, okay? So when we match these four things together, we get Feng Shui.
I see, okay. So these four factors that you've mentioned, be it the environment, the building structure, time, and people, how does this relate in terms of Embassy Garden and focusing more on the modern?
Okay, yes. So I think let's look at environment first, right? Environment, we talk about there are only two factors. One is the mountain, one is water. But clearly this place doesn't have any big mountains or hills, but it does have water, okay? And in fact, if you look at the overall picture of where the location of Embassy Gardens is, it's the distance from where the Buckingham Palace towards this, it's in the stomach of that water. Now, when we look at the entire River Thames, right, we have the head, the stomach, and the tail is like a dragon. We call this a water dragon. So this is the central part where the water is collecting, okay? So that's the first thing. So environment we have. But the next thing is, do we have a structure? So the structure, you have the modern and you have the other buildings, the Penguin Random House, I think you're talking about.
Yes,
so the other
correct.
buildings, right? So the location is the design or the location in such a way to receive the energy from the water. So right now there's no blockages, right? There's no structures that are blocking that building from receiving such energy. Well, the most important factor now will be time. Will it be a prosperous period? So when I was looking at the Feng Shui for this area, I was looking at it in terms of cycle 9. So period 9, which is starting from 2023, 2024. So we are looking forward. You don't want to look at the building that you want to design only for like 2015 when I saw the landforms back then. So that time, it's already over. So we're looking forward to the upcoming cycles. Okay, so it is designed for that purpose. So it qualifies in that aspect.
I see. Okay, when you actually mention about the environment, does man-made environment come into play? Because along the US Embassy itself, there's a lot of water features as well. Does that give off energy as well? So it does.
The real energy, okay, it helps facilitate, but man-made is never as good as Mother Nature.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Mother Nature, you can say, is the work of God, right? It's created by nature. So that is the most powerful. The second to that, design, which is man-made, will help facilitate the flow from nature. First, you got to have the energy in the environment in order for you to design it to facilitate that. So you have all this, the linear garden with all the water formation will be able to facilitate what you have there. Let me put in a very simple terms for people to understand, okay? If you don't have hair, you cannot go and perm your hair, okay? So agreed, right? You're gonna go to salon and say, I want to perm my hair, but I don't have hair, right? So if you look at an environment, it doesn't have the natural energy from natural forces. No matter what you design, you cannot capture the energy because they don't exist in the first place. So the good thing is such energies do exist in that area. But previously, it was not designed to receive it. But now, because with all this, you have the linear gardens, the parks and all that, it helps you flow the energy towards the building. So that is a good thing.
I see. Okay. So the River Thames is definitely an advantage for the residents here in terms of Feng Shui. So
Definitely.
For investors wise and for owner occupiers, is there a difference when they purchase a property? So for investors, what should they be looking for? Because they won't be actually personally staying in the property itself.
Definitely there will be a difference because if I were to stay in that the place, I would choose something that will be more in line with my personal vibrational energy, my directions, right? Certain directions are better for me if I'm staying there. Now, if I'm not going to stay there, then the area itself or just whichever floor itself will be good enough because those floors will generally people who stay in the floors, they're more prosperous, they can pay their rent. That's most important, right? So I want to look for areas that has that, that +1 point. So that will be certain directions that might be, in terms of that area, might have a certain advantage. Now, of course, if you say, well, I don't really believe in Feng Shui, that doesn't matter. You can choose any direction, right? But let's say if you do, you want that small thing, it's like design. Some people go for the design because it gives you a plus point, correct? It's like certain direction where they can see the environment, they get a plus point. So Feng Shui is exactly the same. If certain areas have the plus, for example, if I was buying this the property, I would look for those that are looking towards or inwards toward the linear path, because that's where the flow of energy is, or looking towards the embassy, for example. That gives me a +1 because that's where the collection of energy will flow.
I see. Okay. So I think you've actually done an assessment for Embassy Gardens back in the year 2015 and 2016. So
Yes,
what has already happened? Yeah, what has from that time until now? Do you see any changes in your assessment?
I think the design has somewhat changed a little bit. The major water formations have not.
Okay.
I think that at that time, the linear park thing was not so clear when I was looking at it. So that has changed, I think. But what has not changed is the river formation. Okay, that has remained the same, of course. So that's the good thing. So the major things are not changed. It's all about alignment. So certain buildings can be aligned differently now, because at that time it was just, when we were looking at it, it was just the big picture. The minor details, like where were the main doors and where were the the water features at that time, those were not out yet. So there's not a major impact. It's still good because the environment is still the same.
Okay, so I think for all the investors, keen investors out there, I think what is on their mind is which are the particular units you think in the modern has a great feng shui. You know, like some top picks.
Right.
Maybe we can give us some of those star buys.
Well, okay, I would think different people might appeal differently to the areas, but in general, I would look towards the park, as I said earlier on, and towards the American Embassy. Yeah, that would be a better choice because there's a special formation for it. Now, in Feng Shui, it's all about collection of energy. Okay.
Okay.
So, and if you are first access to it, you get it first. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, so if you're facing the other side to the road, well, yeah, the road has slightly lesser than the ones facing inwards to the park, because facing inwards to the park actually faces the water. That's where the natural water is coming in. So I would choose that first. Okay, so if there's a choice, I would choose that first. And also, the height actually does matter, because if either A, I will go really low to access the road, the ground level energy, or I will go really high up to access the water, which I can see. Because if I go in the middle, I might be blocked from the other units that I couldn't see the water. Okay. So I will get extra benefit if I can see the water flow. Okay. So that is how I will select the feng shui.
All right. Okay. That is very informative. I think you give a very good summary of what elements to look out for as well. And I think the audience here that is attending this, you know, same as me as well. I didn't know much about feng shui. So I think you have given us a very good overview of what is it and certain things to pick up on, especially if you are looking to invest in a property, and if feng shui is something that you think that is of importance value for you. So right now, I think we have come to the end of our webinar. Let's actually start off with the Q&A questions. So I would like to invite our panelists back. But before we start off with the Q&A, so for the audience out there, there's actually a Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. You can go on there and type in your questions and we'll answer them live. Okay, so you can target your questions to any one of our panelists today, Roger, Dato, Joey Yap, as well as Michael McGill and myself. We are here to answer your questions. But before that, all right, I'd like to highlight to you that we are actually having a Singapore exclusive exhibition here in my Seville's office, okay, at the Prudential Tower. This is happening from today onwards all the way to Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if for you guys out there that's watching this webinar, if you are interested to come by the exhibition, please scan this QR code, you know, contact us and we can schedule a one-to-one consultation and book an appointment for you. Okay, so please contact us because the slots are very limited. So in order to avoid disappointment, if there isn't any slot for you, please book early. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. And now let's move on to the questions. We have some coming about. Okay, so I think maybe let's start off with targeting this first question to Michael. So this is from Mr. Tan. Mr. Tan asked, or rather he commented and said that it looks like England is going into a hard Brexit by the end of December, with Boris going hardball with EU. How will this hard Brexit impact the property market? Will the growth be slow, trade will drop, or less people will come in? So this is by Mr. Tan. Michael, can you take this question by Mr. Tan?
Yep, sure. So yeah, no, we're obviously approaching a crunch time in regards to the Brexit negotiations. They've kind of taken a bit of a back seat, obviously, with the UK sort of trying to deal with the pandemic, as is the rest of the country. So it's kind of gone a bit unnoticed up until now, and obviously now we've got just over 3 months left of negotiations. It's obviously hard to predict the outcome of these negotiations. We use Oxford Economics as our economic forecaster, and we take their sort of baseline scenarios, but they themselves are still thinking it is that they placed a 60% probability on a deal being agreed and a 40% of a chance of a no deal outcome. So it's obviously there's still a bit of time for negotiation, but they still feel it's more likely than not that we do get a deal. There's obviously strong motivations on both sides to reach a deal. In the scenario of a hard Brexit, there will of course be some negative effect on GDP. Growth will be obviously a bit slower, a lack of trade. Although I guess the first quarter of next year is going to be sort of an interesting one, which might mitigate some of the lack of activity. You've obviously got the stamp duty holiday, which is in place until the end of Q1 next year, and also the first quarter of next year is the last quarter before that 2% overseas surcharge comes in. So we are likely to, or this could potentially offset some of that, some of the negative impact of a hard Brexit. But I think in the long run, there can still be strong confidence in sort of London's status. Those fundamentals which I mentioned during my presentations, they'll remain. There will of course be a bit of political uncertainty over the coming weeks. But also, if we sort of compare that with other areas in the world, where we've had the elections going on in the US, you've got ongoing uncertainty in Hong Kong. So London's sort of not on its own in sort of battling sort of political uncertainty. So I think London's sort of historic reputation as sort of a safe haven will sort of shine through. There obviously will be a little bit of a sort of drawback in terms of sort of GDP growth if there's a hard Brexit. But of course, we're still waiting to see and waiting sort of to see some sort of cement, I guess, in terms of certainty with regards to how Brexit's going to turn out.
Thank you very much.
As a developer, could I come in on the back of that?
Sure, please.
You know, one of the things that's really interesting about our Brexit journey in the UK has been all of the presumed negative predictions about the outcome, none of which have come true at all. Predictions of hundreds of thousands of jobs leaving the financial district, and absolutely none of that has come to fruition. What I would also say for an overseas investor is that uncertainty is priced into the value of the pounds today. The pound is really at a sort of mid-historic low. And now with your overseas currency is the time to be diving into this marketplace, because once the dust is settled and the UK has the freedom to act at its own choice about economic decisions and so forth, you're going to see the UK turn into, dare I say it, and commentators have said similarly, a kind of a Singapore of this part of the planet, with free ports and a trade policy, an aggressive trade policy, which I think is going to reap rewards. So I think, you know, that uncertainty creates the right timing today to be buying into the UK economy. So, you know, that uncertainty is a great thing for real estate investors.
Right, thank you very much, Roger. I think the next question I have is also targeted towards you. So Ms. Chan actually asked about the residence profile at Embassy Gardens, like the age group. I think because some of the pictures that you showed earlier there were a lot of young people around, but I'm sure that we have some families who are staying there as well, yeah?
Oh, yeah. You know, there's a certain sort of community of people who like using Instagram, of course. And, you know, that's generally the sort of, you know, young professionals, the sort of, you know, early 30s, that sort of age. But what is really interesting about Embassy Gardens, and dare I say it, all three of the EcoWorld Ballymore projects, is the great appeal it has to what we call in the UK as downsizers as well. So a lot of people who are selling up their large homes and because the kids have moved out. And that's also a very, very significant part of our community mix. So yes, Instagram is a platform for young people, but in the main, our communities are amazingly diverse, with children as well, plenty of children. So yes, a sort of a rich mix of people.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. So I have a question from Atlas. He said, just out of curiosity, what happened to the previous Legacy 2B? So this has actually been renamed to the Modern. Is that, am I right, Roger?
I don't understand the question. My apologies.
So I think he heard of this project before and he was asking about Legacy 2. So Legacy 2 has been renamed to The Modern, and The Modern is actually the last residential phase of Embassy Gardens. He has another question as well, because Roger, you mentioned that the pedestrian bridge has been approved by the government. When will the construction of the bridge commence?
Well, just in answer to the positioning of the buildings, you know, the thing that we are very aware of is that people like to have choice. And if you would like to buy an apartment in the Legacy building, that would also be fantastic. It's a different aesthetic. It's a different type of interior finish. And so the reason why we came forward with the Modern is because a variety, really. And we thought, well, this was the last piece. We thought, well, that would be terrific. Let's, you know, we love design. You know, we love designing kitchens and bathrooms and interiors. You know, we get excited about that sort of stuff. So dare I say it, you know, like this great designers, we like, you know, we like playing with those sorts of things. So hence the reason for the positioning of the Modern. In terms of the construction of the pedestrian footbridge, I do not have an answer for that. This is now with government. And unfortunately, it's hard to get any sort of firm decision making in terms of timelines around that sort of stuff, particularly now with the virus. But it has been committed. It is going to get built. There was the process to getting it to the approval stage took about 7 or 8 years. So it was a very long process of consultation, and it was an international design competition for it as well. So it's coming. You know, this type of infrastructure does take a little time, but it's coming, and it's coming pretty quickly. You know, driven, I dare say, by the embassy itself, because it's not just about people living here. It's really to service this international diplomatic precinct, really, and connecting people by foot and by bicycle directly up into Pimlico and the Victoria Corridor. So it's all part of this mayor's plans. And, you know, the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is very much in favor of pedestrian and cycling, pedestrian traffic and cycling over and above that of cars. So it's happening, but I can't give you a firm commitment because I don't know.
Sure, no problem. Thank you very much, Roger. Okay, I have another question from Maureen as well. She asked, what's the rental yield like if an investor were to invest? So what are the income levels we would be targeting for potential tenants? I think for Embassy Gardens, the rental yield will depend on whether you're buying a 1-bed or 2-bed as well. I think right now for Legacy, we're looking at gross about 4% rental yields on the 2 beds. So also for potential clients for a 2-bed, we are looking at about £750 per week in terms of the rental. So the income levels, I think it would be more of the young professionals, like what Roger has mentioned. Those are the current existing tenants that are actually renting in Embassy Gardens itself. And like what Roger shared when he was talking about the site map, there's a US Embassy there, as well as the corporate tenants such as Penguin Publishing House. And all of that has employees that are coming to 9 Elms itself in Embassy Gardens to work. And we're talking about 3,000 over professionals. And this is just in this small area. And if you're talking about the wider area, such as Battersea Park, there'll be even more corporate tenants as well in that region. So I hope I answered your question, Maureen. Let's take another question from.
Sorry,
Roger, go ahead, please.
Yeah, you know, we keep very close tabs on who is actually living in our buildings, and our buildings are almost always 100% full. You know, near 98% on consistent level, and people do pay a premium to live in a Ballymore building, and that research has been undertaken by Savills.
Yes, correct.
Who have demonstrated through their research an absolute premium to owning and to living in a Ballymore building. Because, you know, when you're renting, your commitment may be for a year or two. And what you're really interested in are other factors apart from investment. You're interested in the social climate within the estate, the facilities, the services, being able to welcome your friends. And because of that special dynamic that we have created at Embassy Gardens and also at the Wardian and City Island, is that people really do want to live in these places. And the demand for renters is, I mean, insatiable. You know, if we could double the number of available units, they would also be let. So it's a great investment.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Seville's, so my company itself is in charge of the lettings at Embassy Gardens, and my colleagues from the UK has mentioned to me that there's actually a waiting list for the tenants that are wanting to occupy and rent in Embassy Gardens. So now the demand is up there, but the supply of apartments, there's not enough to fulfill it. So, this is a very good advantage if, let's say, you are purchasing as an investor, because the void period of your unit would be very low. In fact, I think it would be less than a month for us to find you a tenant to be able to place them in your unit itself. So I think I have a question from Dato Joey. So Ms. Lim actually asked, is there different, you mentioned about the different facings for Feng Shui. How about as an investor, or for example, as a purchaser, does the zodiac sign come into play as well? For example, she was asking if she's born in the year of a rat. Would it matter in terms of the Feng Shui element?
No, unless you're staying in there, that's not necessary to personalize the energies. So if you want a generic direction that is usually suitable for most people, it's north-south axis.
North-south. Okay, sure. Thank you very much. So I think there's one other question from Mr. Ing. Michael, maybe you can take this. He asked, with more people able to work from home, it seems that more are searching for homes outside the London city itself. Will this actually affect London prices, as we can already see a depressing price in New York City?
Yeah, so there has been a lot of talk about how the whole new working from home sort of era, if you like, will affect people, or what people want from their properties in or across the country, really. And there's been a lot of talk of people moving from London into the country, although from what we've seen so far, obviously I showed it in the slides, that prime market values have held up very well over the past 2 quarters when we've had all of this disruption. So I think people are actually sort of recognizing that this is an opportunity, following the price wars that we've seen over the past few years, that this is an opportunity to or a good time to buy in London as well. And there have been reports put out by Zoopla, which is one of the UK's major sort of property listing websites in the UK. And they put out reports saying that this so-called flight from London is being over-exaggerated. I think people still want to live in London. I think the whole working from home, obviously a lot of people now are doing it sort of full time, but once we sort of fast forward maybe 6 months or so, then I think people sort of they will start returning to the office, maybe not, every day, maybe 3 or 4 days a week. So I think that whole sort of massive exodus from London into sort of the greener space of the country, again, is a bit over-exaggerated. Don't expect it to, or it hasn't so far had a significant impact on prices in the capital.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Okay, Dato' Joey, I have another question for you. To determine the suitable apartment facing, do we use the main apartment building door, the apartment unit door, or the unit living room facing direction?
Okay, if you're going to get a unit, normally if you're going to stay for yourself, just the unit direction is good enough. Okay, now for apartments, we use the balcony facing. Okay, if you want to see if the whole block is good or not, then you look at the building as a whole.
I see. So it really depends on what you're looking for. So if you're looking at the building, look at the building door. And then if your unit itself...
If I put it simply, if you're buying the whole building, then look at the building. Right? So you're only buying one unit, right? So look at your own unit.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Sure. Okay. So Alice is also asking whether the units in the modern come with air conditioning and floor heating. Yes, it does come with comfort cooling as well as underfloor heating. So the specifications wise is in our brochure as well. For anyone who wants to know in detail what the finishings are like, please come and contact us. Contact me here at Seville Singapore, and I can go through it with you. So I think we will probably come to an end of our webinar now because we slightly overrun. So thank you very much for joining us today. Just remember that we have an exclusive launch here in Singapore in our office itself. So it is from today onwards to Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And if you guys are interested, please click on the QR code. And I'm sort of going to bring my laptop with me as traveling to let you see the back. We have in our office the model of the modern So just bear with me while I'll bring you out to have a look. So we have our light box here. You can see that's in the back. The modern building, very fantastic. So it's a very exciting time here for us, and I do invite you to come down to join us here at the exhibition. So thank you very much, Dr. Joya, Roger, as well as Michael, for today's presence in our webinar. We hope all of you here enjoyed this interesting topic that we have brought together for you. So thank you very much, everyone. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email it to us, and we'll have everyone answer you. If we couldn't answer your question live on the webinar today, so apologize for it. But we've come to the end of the webinar now. We'll try to get back to you on your questions. But if not, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.